Good day and happy 2025. This is our first webinar of this year, and I'm very excited, especially due to the timing, to invite Megan Hodgson from IBT on. As some of you may know, there was a new code that was just introduced to the upper limb world, L6700. So we'll touch on that, but we'll also answer any questions that anybody has about IBT, the Glide system, who it's intended for, how it works. Megan will share some live screenshots of how the system actually operates. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Megan into our stage. Good morning, afternoon, wherever everybody is. Megan, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
Great. Could you share a little bit about your background? I know this could be a little bit hard to read, but for further information, anybody can obviously go to your website, i-biomed.com. But how did you get into the world of upper limb and end up at IBT?
So I was actually an intern at IBT after my undergrad. I had an extra semester and they were down the street, so it was a good fit. I had intended to go back to school to get my MPO, so I kind of wanted to stay in prosthetics for a couple years. So I stayed there for a few years. I did, went to school, and then I ended up coming back to help with some of these new product launches. So
awesome, yeah. And there's obviously there are specific things that people know about IBT. A lot of the times it's the flex cell batteries, and there's been a lot of changes that have happened with you guys over the last year or so of just kind of refreshing and coming back out onto the market and informing people in a new way of what is possible with your product offering, which one of those big things was the Glide system, which I think, did you unveil it at last year's AOPA? Or maybe it was even before.
I think we sort of started talking about it last year, and then I guess in 2023, but we officially launched in June of 2024.
Okay. And so, just like with other hand manufacturers in general, I guess everybody says, oh my God, there's so many of them. Everybody's kind of tripping over each other. But when you really look at the products themselves, yes, they may be eerily similar, but there are differences and nuances that answer the needs of different individuals and what their needs are. And so if you could talk a little bit about Glide and kind of how this idea came about with other offerings already on the market. And so why Glide, and why did you feel that it was needed in the market?
So Glide was actually sorry, I have a bit of a cold.
No, you're good.
So Glide was a PhD project at University of Colorado Boulder, in Dr. Weir's lab. So the original goal was just to have another kind of control system to help people reach their potential with their prosthesis. So we actually previously had a sort of traditional pattern rec system on the market for a few years. And then kind of as we developed this idea and worked with patients, we found just another area, another option for people to be able to get more function out of their prosthesis. So I think just like hands on the market with control systems too, you're just finding the option that fits your patient the best.
And so how, without necessarily name dropping or anything like that, but how is Glide different from those other systems? How is it easier to use? And I know you had shared before we all hopped on that we can take a look at this kind of virtual setup of what somebody may see when they're setting it up. But is it just a simplicity manner for Glide versus, whenever you think of pattern rec, you think, oh my God, there's so many electrodes. How do I make sure that it's right?
So I think one of the big things about Glide is you're kind of setting up the system to match what your patient needs. So I think it's a very simple, straightforward kind of concept. It's more like almost like a hybrid between a traditional direct control system and pattern rec. So you're kind of pulling some of those elements of advanced control where you can directly access functions on the prosthesis. Instead of having to do a co-contraction, you can directly do an elbow bend or a hand open without having to do switching. But you have a little bit more transparency in exactly how those signals are coming, from the person, and how they're being translated into a movement on the prosthesis. So all of that setup is adjustable by the clinician, and you're not calibrating to get the outputs.
Okay. And is it compatible with pretty much all of the hands that are out there on the market, or just a select few, or?
Yeah, it's very widely compatible. I think generally in the US, clinicians kind of pick and choose which components will be best for their patient. And so all prostheses are kind of unique. So, as new hands come on the market, there might be a small delay between when we kind of see it come out and when we're compatible. But I think there is sort of an industry standard of, 7.4 volt hand and accepting, certain range of input. So as long as they're in that spec, more or less, it's going to be compatible.
Okay. Gotcha. And so I think we should take a look at what this looks like. So I don't know if you wanted to share your screen so we can take a look at what somebody can expect in terms of the experience for Glide. I think that would be really interesting.
Share my screen.
And I might need to add it, so I'll do that. And it's good to have options out there for, like you said, the different types of users that are out there. Here, I'll share this that way. It's a full screen for you. So, or do we need to see you so you can kind of walk us through what you're doing?
I'll probably just be waving my hands around, so you don't need to see me.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Yeah, this is exciting.
Cool. So this is the Glide app. It's called IBT Control. It's available on iPads. And this is the signal screen. So basically what I'm doing on the signal screen is going through site selection to identify sites that you're going to use as inputs to the algorithm. So with traditional control, you've got typically 1 or 2 sites. With pattern recognition, you typically have 8. Glide will work with 2 to 8, and it's just very dependent on kind of what you're trying to get out of the prosthesis, as well as how many areas of muscle activity the patient has. So, for example, if you have a patient and they're just struggling to even get 2 isolated sites to achieve direct control, and all they want is to open and close their hand, we could still just use a two electrode glide system. I can kind of walk you through that example. I think that's kind of a nice bridge.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're using 2 electrodes and we go to this map setup page, I could say I've got really good control. Just to orient you, this is the Glide map. These little areas here are called slices. And so those slices will get assigned a movement on the prosthesis. And then if you contract, you can see these blue lines on here are the relative strength of each electrode. And the red line is kind of the sum of the strength of the electrodes. So as I contract harder, that red line gets longer because it's just kind of adding up the strength of those 2 electrodes. So, where with direct control, you've got kind of antagonistic muscles. It's almost like a tug of war where one electrode is pulling one way, the other's pulling the other way, and whichever one is stronger wins. This one, it's not really whichever is stronger wins. It's just always looking at all the electrodes all the time to figure out which, how they're kind of helping each other. So anyways, if you have a patient and they've got really clean, strong signal like this, but they've got a lot of coactivity for their other signal, they can never really get that gray one by itself.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can actually move these slices to make it easier to access that movement or
Okay.
that has a lot of coactivity. So all these borders are very mobile. So if I say that, this is my close and this is my open, I'm just tapping on the slice and assigning it a movement.
Okay. I see.
So yeah, if my close signal is just very clean every time, it's very accurate, I can make that slice very narrow because I kind of hit that on the mark every time. And I can make my open signal kind of very wide. And so no matter what kind of signal I send it, it's always going to end up in that slice, which represents open. So I can account for variability, and I can make it a little bit easier for patients to hit, those their goal movement more exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Is it possible to trigger a movement that you don't want to trigger by kind of moving these slices around so much, or it's just a matter of training?
Possibly, yeah. The goal with this is because it's adjustable, is that you can even hide the screen from your patient, and you can just have them say, like, imagine you're open, and then have them do an open, and then see where that signal ends up on the screen. And then you can set up the map to match what you're seeing from them without them looking at it and like adjusting to the system. You can kind of adjust the system to what they're getting. And if you are getting accidental motions, there is this option called walls. And so what walls does is it basically creates a wall between each movement. So if you're in a movement, it's kind of like first over on a dual site system. Once you're in a movement, it won't activate a different movement, even if your EMG goes into there. So, if I activate close and then I start kind of going like that, it stays locked and closed.
And so then what do you have to do to activate that other movement?
You would just go rest. So anywhere in this kind of white area is a no movement. So once you go back down to rest, you're able to activate that.
But the idea is that for maybe somebody that has more training than a novice, that eventually, maybe initially they start off with these walls, but eventually they can very seamlessly just move through these movements without necessarily having to return to rest. Is that accurate? Or
yeah, so if the walls are off and someone's able to just go back and forth, you could just kind of do that. So
that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And then as someone, if somebody just had TMR and they've got very strong specific sites. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I feel bad making you talk.
That's okay. So yeah, so maybe you add more electrodes. And so that's kind of where you start to see a lot of extra benefit from Glide. So like I kind of mentioned, it's very scalable. So you're matching the patient if they're here and they only have 2 areas of muscle activity and there's a lot of coactivity, you can set up with just a 2 electrode map. But we've worked with a shoulder dysarthritic patient who we've added 6 electrodes because they had very specific sensations of their fingers. So, with this, I'm just adding a 3rd electrode here. And you can see I still have that like pretty strong green signal I had before. I've added this blue one, which is the 3rd area that I can activate. And then I have a lot of coactivity here between my blue and my gray electrode. So what I can do again is move these boundaries over and kind of bring in this inner border here is like an on threshold.
Yeah.
So if I'm having trouble activating a slice, I can bring it in to make it easier. So now I can kind of activate those 3 areas pretty independently. So yeah, if I wanted to say I have, 3 specific sites and I want to get hand open, close, and elbow bend and extend, I can still assign a close, an open, and then maybe I'll make this elbow extend. Oops, I don't have elbow here right now. We'll just say wrist instead.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll do a palm down there. So say as a patient, I only have three distinct muscle patterns I can create. Well, I can still add more functions to this. So I can potentially add a second movement to each slice.
Okay.
I could assign a second movement to this. And this is very similar to like 4-channel control or fast access on some of the wrists. So if I kind of do a slow contraction, I get one motion. If I do a quick one, I can get the second motion I've assigned there. So you're still giving patients access to all those functions, even if they're not able to create, a sufficient number of muscle patterns.
Gotcha.
For the functions they want.
That's exciting. Certainly, it certainly seems easy to use while still having additional access to maybe just the whole process not being as overwhelming to somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And the goal is always I kind of prefer to start simple, get people used to something. And then the goal is always to kind of let people keep growing. So if I've got this map set up and then down the road, I'm like, oh, I figured out a way to activate this little area over here on the map independently. So now, I can add another motion to this map. The number of slices you're using doesn't have to be tied to, the number of electrodes you're using doesn't have to be tied to the number of functions that you have.
Okay.
So we're just trying to make this very adjustable and user-friendly.
And is some of the adjustability, does it all have to be done in the clinic by a clinician, or is some of this changeable and updatable by the user themselves?
So it's really dependent on the clinician. The goal is that it doesn't have to be updated out of the office. So because you can kind of account for quite a bit of variability within the map by, making these boundaries wider or bringing in these boundaries in or out. The goal would be that you in the clinic could set things up, have your patient try different activities that they might be doing at home. And then not need to really update it at home. We've had a few patients where they take it home and they just kind of adjust it themselves because it is pretty user-friendly, but that, again, is kind of something the patient and clinician can decide together.
And then is there, if they decide that, yes, John can go home and, update some of these things, or are there parameters that the clinician can set? Or maybe if something gets reset, is there like a back to home type of scenario of what the settings used to be?
Yeah, there's an option where you can
default.
It's not necessarily a default because every map is going to be specific to the patient, but you can go in here and save and load.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah. And I just saw, so on that previous screen, it shows you all the different components that would obviously work together here. And like you said, elbow and the wrist as well. And so what does, now that there is this new code, what does this mean to the upper limb population, this L6700? For these types of technologies, what should they look ahead to once April 1 hits or expect?
Well, I guess it depends what their insurance is. This has been a very new process for me, so it was really exciting to be part of a group of manufacturers coming together to kind of all help try to benefit the patients that we work with. It'll become active April 1st, and my assumption is that people can start using that to apply for authorization or with Medicare, submitting that for billing. In terms of, justifications, I know Medicare has certain requirements for myoelectric control for people. So I don't know if there will long-term end up being like an extra requirement for why you need this type of technology on top of, standard. We don't have an LCD for upper limb or local coverage determination.
Okay.
So I would say we'll kind of see how the billing, how the claims go, but we have a code now, so I imagine
it's a
more
huge
legs to
step.
stand on.
Yeah, it's a huge step in the right direction, and it's great to see. And I'm sure it was a long time coming. But it, in time, like you said, once all the other stuff kind of falls in behind it, it'll be exciting to see this technology get utilized more, and not just in certain cases, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
So, is there, as we I don't see any questions. And again, I'll remind anybody that's listening in live, if they have anything that they wanted to ask, obviously they can reach out to you guys on your website, or find you on LinkedIn, or find IBT on LinkedIn, and, kind of go from there. But is there, I guess, is there a particular question or concern, or however we'd phrase it, that comes up when somebody first learns about Glide, of saying, oh, I didn't know XYZ, or I didn't realize that, this was a possibility, or maybe misinformation of, I thought it was just like, whatever. Is there anything like that should be addressed so that more people know about the capabilities and the differences?
Yeah, I think one of the big questions we get is, how do I know if this is right for my patient, and how many electrodes should I have in my system? And so for that, I just usually tell people the big thing is to request an evaluation kit so that you can try this on your patient. IBT? Yeah, so I'm wearing one right now.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So we just use stick-on electrodes on the skin, and we send this little pedestal guy to your office with an iPad. And so, if available, we'd love to be there, but we can always just remotely walk you through how to do the evaluation. And in general, what you're looking for is to just identify, again, like different, either, if your patient has phantom sensations and they can feel certain fingers, or they can feel a wrist motion, we can identify those signals on their skin. Otherwise, we can kind of just put electrodes around the arm, see what's available, and go from there. So.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think definitely a lot more to learn, a lot more to see what happens after April 1. And hopefully all of this kind of continues to take off. And like I said, more users are able to utilize this technology that could significantly make their lives easier, with all these other devices that are out there for upper limb amputees. But I think, there's obviously a lot more information on the i-biomed.com site that is scrolling on the bottom. But thank you for joining me today, Megan. I know you guys are probably going to be at the Next Academy show, where people can experience this more. And like you said, demo kits can be sent out so that people can get a better understanding for how this works, who it can work for, if there's an ideal user that could benefit from this. But thank you for joining me today and kind of kicking off the year and gliding into 2025.
Yes.
And I can't take credit for that. Your great marketing guy shared that. And I think it's definitely the right step forward for this industry. So I'm sure it was a big undertaking. So kudos.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, no. And so I welcome anybody to, like I said earlier, check out IBT's website, link in with them if you haven't already. I'll be sharing this recording on our YouTube, on the Calibration Marketing YouTube channel. So feel free to ask questions there. And until next time, thank you for joining again today. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, that's it.